What's good, everybody? I hope everyone is having a great week so far. I actually just finished watching the press conference between Shakur Stevenson and William Zepeda. Okay, the main event will be Edgar Berlanga against Hamza Shiraz. All right, Shiraz is moving up to 168. But listen, I'm gonna make a separate video for that fight. I was gonna include both since I'm talking about the press conference as well. But I wanted to talk about this fight. Okay, this is a fight that could have happened a couple of times already between Shakur and William. There's a lot of things that I want to talk about here in this video because this is not going to be a full breakdown or anything like that. I'll give you a breakdown at some point. But this fight is scheduled for July 12th. It's actually 2 days after my birthday. It's actually one day after the Katie Taylor Amanda Serrano trilogy fight. So I'm trying to decide because I want to find ways to celebrate my birthday, and being that both of these fights will be in New York, that weekend. I'm trying to figure out what exactly I'm going to do about like what fights I'm going to attend, what fights am I going to cover live. I'll figure all that out at some point, but I'm really, really excited for this fight. Because it's a very, very important fight. I know these guys have fought some good fighters. I know Shakur is a three-division champion. He's fought some really good fighters, but this is his most important fight, especially for him. William is finally getting a full title. I know he's been like ranked number one in every sanctioning body. But this fight here is Shakur's most important fight. It's both of their most important fights because Zepeda is fighting for a title. But Shakur is defending his title, but he's actually fighting someone that has been a top contender at the division for some years now. Someone that's strong, powerful, durable, high volume, and someone that I think has a chance of ruining the night for Shakur, depending on how this fight is going to go. Um, but it's also a fight where Shakur can look good and shine because now, being that he's such a defensive fighter, he's fighting someone that he's going to be forced to let his hands go. I don't think moving is going to get him the win. So everybody should be happy about this fight here because if you're a Zepeda fan, you're going to be probably fighting, he's going to be fighting someone that you most likely dislike. And if you're a Shakur fan, now he has no choice but to let his hands go because he's fighting someone that's roughly throwing around 1,100 punches a fight in his better days. The fights that normally go to a decision, he's doing well over 1,000 punches in a fight. So it's a great matchup. This is the fight that I wanted to see. Of course, I would love to see Shakur fighting a tank, and I know him and Keyshawn are boys, so most likely they're not going to fight each other. But this is one of those ones, and I think both of them need to be at their very, very best. I'm going to start out with William Zepeda and talking about both of the Tevin Farmer fights. All right, both close fights. Not many people were expecting them to be as competitive as they were, especially the first fight, because Zepeda was dropped in that fight against Tevin Farmer, who's been around for a long time and never really been a puncher. I mean, him himself has always been a defensive fighter as well, one of the better defensive fighters out there. But offensively, he never really packed a big punch, but he was able to stun Zepeda a couple times in that fight, knocking him down. And, I think a lot of people at the end of that fight thought he won. Now, the second fight, another close fight. I think it wasn't as close as the first one. I think it was just a different kind of fight where Zepeda was doing really, really well early on. And this is from when I remember. Zepeda was doing better in the second fight early, but it seemed like he started to slow down. And it seemed like Farmer started to pick it up in the second half. All right, it wasn't enough to win a decision, but it was another close fight, in my opinion. It was definitely still close. Both fights were still close to me. All right. Um, when I saw that second fight, and then when I realized that Shakur was most likely going to fight Zepeda next, you know how people are, boxing fans specifically, you're as good as your last fight. And when you look bad in a fight, well, in this case, bad in two fights in a row, everybody starts discrediting you. Like you're overhyped. You was juicing all this time. You're overhyped. Farmer knocked you down. You have no chin. You're overrated. Yada yada yada. Same things happen to Shakur Stevenson when he has tough fights, or when he has fights where it's like staying at the same pace. Like the Haratunian fight, for example. I mean, he clearly won the fight, but people were mad that he was boring and he couldn't stop him. The Edwin De Los Santos fight. We know what happened there. He ran. He had a injured hand at the time, so he didn't really engage with De Los Santos. But then you got William Zepeda here that's coming off the two fights against Tevin Farmer, where he didn't look great. He didn't look as dominant as he normally does look. When I see those fights, I don't automatically think like, oh, because he struggled in this fight, then Shakur should easily win. Because at the end of the day, if we all believe that Shakur is a better fighter than Tevin Farmer right now, which in my opinion he is, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to do better than Tevin Farmer did, because Tevin Farmer did things in that fight that I haven't seen Shakur do. I've seen Shakur be a dog. I've seen Shakur walk guys down and beat them up, but it wasn't against a guy like William Zepeda. You know what I mean? Who's used to going to war. Okay. Um, Tevin Farmer did things in that fight that made it very, very, very challenging for Zepeda. And being that, he's an older guy, you know what I mean? Like he's been around, he's a lot more experienced than Shakur. Plus, I don't think he has the hand injuries like Shakur have. A lot of people bring up Shakur and his brittle hands. People used to say the same about Floyd. What I say to that is Shakur is going to have to fight sometimes in this fight. He's going to have to fight. And we may see him get hit more often than we've seen him before. And if there's a scenario where Shakur can't hurt him, right? That makes it a very interesting fight. Because in order to get Zepeda to slow down, you can't just be a good defender and a good counterpuncher. You gotta buzz him. You gotta make him respect what you're bringing back, and that's what Farmer did. Shakur's gonna have to do the same thing. Um, and in order to do that, he's gonna have to take more risks. Now, Shakur is not normally a over mover. I think the De Los Santos fight was the only one where he was like that. I think all the other fights he's had in his career, he's never fought like that. That was the only fight. Now, there's a difference between being defensive and being a complete mover. What we saw Shakur do in that fight was just him being moving a lot. What we saw Devin Haney recently do against Jose Ramirez, it was over moving. What we saw Skull do against Canelo, over moving. Just too much moving, not enough punches thrown. Not enough activity. Pot shotting and moving, and then sometimes you go periods without even throwing any punches. Okay, what Shakur got to understand in this fight here is that you got a fighter that's used to people moving, and he's always forcing his opponent. He's always cutting off the ring and trying to trap his opponents. And I don't think that's going to necessarily work here. So if Shakur starts to engage a little bit more by being defensive, but up close defensive, this is what we're going to learn. Can he really do that at this level against a high volume puncher? Can you stay in the pocket with Zepeda, make him miss, make him pay, and hurt him to where you can slow down his volume? That's the way you're going to have to beat him. And there's a risk that come with that. It's not going to be, it's Floyd's one of his best performances was against Canelo, because I know a lot of those Canelo fans and those guys over there like to say like Floyd ran in that fight. He didn't run in that fight. He stayed in front of him, made him miss, and made him pay by staying right, even walking him down at times. Today in the press conference, I heard Eddie did a brilliant drop job. I mean, when Eddie's really on top of his game, he's a great promoter because he's just saying that Shakur is should be the ring champion. He's saying Shakur is the best American fighter. He's saying Shakur is the best fighter we've seen since Floyd, maybe even the best. He's saying all these crazy things that hasn't been proven, and it's only crazy because it hasn't been proven. When I see Shakur, I see glimpses of that greatness, but I've seen fights where it didn't really look that crazy good because you know, maybe the opponent didn't bring the fight to him. Maybe he just wasn't aggressive enough. Maybe he was doing a lot of movement like in an Edwin fight. So this will be the fight here where if you have any doubts about him, he could change it. He could turn it around. And for Zepeda, he can fully expose Shakur if Shakur can't deal with volume, and I know Shakur is going to hit him. I know Shakur is going to counter. I know how Shakur is going to be defensively slick. But what can you do to win the fight instead of just being defensive and making him miss? You have to make him pay. And when a guy like Zepeda is so high volume, even if you make him miss with one or two shots, what about the third and fourth shots? What if he's punching with you while you're trying to counter? You know what I mean? Shakur might get hit here. And we're going to see how he takes a hit because we don't normally see him get hit that much. You know what I mean? Especially from a puncher. I don't think Zepeda is a huge puncher. I think he breaks his opponents down based off overwhelming them and just throwing a lot of punches. But we'll see how Shakur deals with that in this fight here. I think this is a perfect matchup for Shakur to show his true talents. There's people that I think Zepeda is better than that Shakur fought, right? But those opponents that fought Shakur was able to make things more difficult for Shakur or made the boxing public dislike him because Shakur didn't step on the gas or, he just wasn't trying to stop his opponent, and I just think he's just not one of those fighters that's looking to get the stoppage. He's just too defensively responsible, and with time, I don't know if he'll ever get to that stage because with age and maturity, I don't think that's going to make you want to be more aggressive, you know, comparing him to Floyd, which many of us do. Floyd was a knockout artist at one point. You know what I mean? Once he started aging and fighting bigger guys at the welterweight and super welterweight divisions, that's when he started to rely simply off his skill set and winning fights on points, regardless if he hurt them or buzzed them. He wasn't looking for the stoppage in a lot of these fights. If it came, it came. So I'm not expecting Shakur to just be an animal in there. But one thing I will say is this. Shakur hurts him to the body if he hurts him. I was saying that in the Josh Padley fight. I said it before the fight, and I said it during the fight. Shakur goes to the body, he stops this guy. And that's what he did. You know, that's what he's gonna have to need to deal with William. You know what I mean? Because that's just where you gotta go sometimes to hurt these guys. You can't just keep headhunting. Take these guys out to the body. And then when it comes to William Zepeda, Zepeda is just gonna have to keep throwing. Because skill for skill, you don't compete. One thing I will say about Zepeda, though, that he needs to bring to this fight, that I saw him do earlier in the Tevin Farmer rematch, but he didn't stick to it. He started out with this fight, not just being overly aggressive. He was throwing behind a jab. Those first few rounds, his jab was working and was active. At some point, he probably felt like the momentum was good. He probably felt like the fight was in the bag. He abandoned his jab and straight, was fighting like he just wanted to get the stoppage quick. He was overly aggressive. And then that started leaving opportunities for Tevin Farmer. Zepeda, at the very least, needs to do his work behind the jab. Shakur, in my opinion, needs to counter, but he needs to punish the body of William Zepeda. Not only would that slow him down, but I also believe that if you're going to actually make this guy take a knee or possibly stop him, that's where it's going to need to be. Because durable fighters like this, guys that's coming forward and being aggressive, they're used to taking a lot of punches to the head in order to get close. Zepeda, in my opinion, you hit him to the body, that's going to slow him down, slow down the volume, and then he's going to be forced into going in protective mode. And if he's in protective mode, that's going to leave more offense for Shakur to walk him down if it gets there. A lot of dissing, a lot of negativity about the American fighters right now, specifically the Black American ones. A lot. I see it every day. This is Shakur's opportunity to change that around. We can't dismiss the hype behind this. We already know that race and prejudice comes along with the sport. Some people are just biased and some people are ruled with hate. You have a Black American fighter against a fighter from Mexico. It's going to get everybody out. It's going to get everybody talking. These are the fights that gets everybody involved. No difference from Crawford and Canelo is going to be the same way once people start really talking about it, after the press conference and all that. It's going to get people really talking. Shakur has an opportunity here to steal that shine that Keyshawn been getting lately. He needs to do it because the American boxing, public right now and the fighters right now, they haven't been looking too great. With that being said, Zepeda has an opportunity to redeem himself from them Tevin Farmer losses, but also become a champion and beating one of the most, technical, defensively sound fighters we've seen in a long time. This is a big fight. I can't wait for this fight. I can't wait to do a breakdown for this fight. And again, just like I started in this video, don't just take the Tevin Farmer fights and think that is the proof, that's going to be the outcome of how this fight is going to go. Tevin Farmer was a dog, and he took a lot of punishment and able to respond and hit back and hurt Zepeda whenever he did. Slow him down. Shakur's approach is a completely different approach. Shakur doesn't want to just sit here and trade and get hit and take that amount of punches to the body like Farmer did in a rematch. You guys got to remember that they're both defensive fighters, but Farmer and Shakur fights completely different. All right. Look forward to talking about this fight. Let me know what you guys think early in the comments. We'll definitely be talking more about this fight leading up to the fight. And I'll see you guys on the next video. Peace.